We are getting a better picture of what the reunification efforts are looking like for migrant children who were once separated from their parents. Still, around 20,000 migrant minors in U.S. custody are in need of connecting with their moms, dads, and sponsors already in America. Camilo Montoya Galvez has been following these developments and joins us now. So, Camilo, in your new article out this morning, you chronicle a young boy named Elmer and his family. Can you tell us about his story? And are reunifications like his becoming more commonplace?
Sure. Good morning, Anne-Marie and Vlad. Back when I was returning to the U.S.-Mexico border earlier this month, I just happened to be on two flights with a group of 13 unaccompanied migrant boys, including 14-year-old Elmer, who you mentioned. This was not planned. It was a mere coincidence. And I traveled with the group of boys to Newark International Airport, and that's where I saw Elmer, a 14-year-old boy from Honduras, hug his mother, Maria, for the first time since 2018. The other boys also reunited with their families at the airport. In many cases, the boys had just recently crossed the border. It was their first time on an airplane, and they had not seen their families for some time. In Elmer's case, for over 2 years. So it was a very emotional moment. And these reunifications, Anne-Marie and Vlad, are part of a broader Biden administration effort to reunite more than 20,000 unaccompanied children currently in U.S. custody with their parents or other relatives here in the U.S. And this is due to the fact that a record number of unaccompanied children have been entering U.S. border custody in recent months. And what we also know is that now Elmer is in Connecticut with his mother. He just started attending virtual classes here in the U.S. for the first time, and he told me that he's looking forward to starting in-person classes next week.
Customs and Border Protection reported a more than 90% decrease in the number of unaccompanied children in custody since late March. Do we know what's led to the decrease, and what does it tell us now about the situation at the border?
Yeah, so for context, Vlad, back in late March, there were about 5,800 unaccompanied children in Border Patrol facilities, which are not designed to hold migrants, let alone children, beyond 72 hours. That was a record number. However, in recent weeks, that number has plummeted by over 90%. Right now, there are less than 600 unaccompanied children in Border Patrol custody across the entire U.S.-Mexico border. So that is a dramatic change. The reason for that, Vlad, is that the Department of Health and Human Services, which is charged with housing these unaccompanied minors in the long term, has opened more than a dozen emergency facilities in convention centers, work camps, and military bases to house these minors while they place them with sponsors, like what happened with Elmer just this month. So there are still 20,000 unaccompanied children, but they are in HHS care. And now that department has to find a way to locate these sponsors, to screen them, to conduct background checks on them, and then ultimately to facilitate their reunification with their family members.
Yeah, I just want to underline that because I think when people hear, the number of minors in custody has sort of gone down, we're talking about Customs and Border Protection. They are in no way, yes, designed or, that. So that's one sort of component of the federal government, Department of the Federal Government. So these children are still not with their loved ones. They've just been shifted over to another department, and then and as you mentioned, there are 20,000 of them that still need to be unified with someone outside of a facility. Okay, so that being said, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas testified on Capitol Hill yesterday. We were playing some of that testimony here. Republican lawmakers pressed him for answers on the Biden administration's rejection of Title 42. Remind us of this policy, and how did the secretary respond to those concerns?
Sure. So during yesterday's hearing before a Senate committee, Senators Mitt Romney and Ron Johnson, Republicans from Utah and Wisconsin, respectively, pressed Secretary Mayorkas on the Biden administration's refusal to implement the Title 42 policy when it comes to unaccompanied minors. In March of 2020, the Trump administration invoked this unprecedented public health authority, now known as Title 42, to rapidly expel most asylum seekers and migrants, including unaccompanied children, from the U.S.-Mexico border under the premise that it could not allow migrants to stay in the U.S. because they could potentially spread COVID-19 inside the country and endanger border officials and broader border communities in the U.S. The Biden administration has kept this policy in place, Anne-Marie and Blad, only when it comes to families and single adults. It has not used it to expel unaccompanied children, and Mayorkas defended that decision, saying that the U.S. has a responsibility to care for these minors. He said that many of them flee dangerous situations, including gang violence, in their home countries, including Central America. And what's really interesting and important to note, actually, Anne-Marie, is that while the Biden administration certainly is not expelling unaccompanied children under this Title 42 policy, the policy of processing them and sheltering them at HHS facilities is not a new policy, right? This is enshrined in U.S. law. U.S. law requires border officials to transfer unaccompanied migrant children to HHS facilities within 3 days and to allow them to seek forms of humanitarian relief from deportation like asylum. So the Biden administration is not implementing a new policy per se, they're just following the law that the Trump administration ignored essentially during the pandemic.
What else did you pick up from that hearing yesterday?
Well, we also heard Senator Mitt Romney specifically press Secretary Mayorkas on root factors of migration to the U.S.-Mexico border. The senator said that the U.S. can possibly help these countries reduce all the factors that prompt people to come here, including poverty and violence, and that it should focus on what he called border security measures, so policies designed to deter people, because unlike the Trump administration, the Biden administration, Blad, has focused on trying to mitigate the factors that prompt migrants to come here. The Trump administration, on the other hand, focused on deterring them from coming here by implementing policies like Remain in Mexico, requiring asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for their hearings, and even separating migrant children from their parents as a form of deterrence. The Biden administration has taken a different approach, one that they say in the long term will actually have an impact on migration.
I guess this announcement from CBP is part of that different approach. CBP, Customs and Border Protection, said that the practice of flying migrant families to the southern border to be expelled to Mexico has been suspended. Why did the Biden administration reverse this, and then what happens now?
Sure. So again, the Title 42 policy, Anne-Marie, is supposed to be based on public health. It is designed to prevent migrants from crowding government holding facilities and spreading the coronavirus. It is designed to protect them, border officials, and border communities from the coronavirus. However, the Department of Homeland Security for some time was flying migrants encountered in Texas all the way to San Diego, so across the border, holding them in facilities with other migrants, putting them on planes and buses with other migrants, and then expelling them to Mexico from California, right across the border. And so advocates say that those flights and that policy undermined the public health justification behind this policy, and the Department of Homeland Security has now decided to discontinue these flights. And I can also tell you that more families are now being allowed to stay, and they're being exempted from this Title 42 policy, and they're being allowed to seek asylum and other forms of relief while they continue their immigration proceedings here in the U.S.
All right, Camilo, as always, we thank you.
Thanks so much.